I am 24, male, and fresh out of college. I recently met with my grandparents and told them that they were strangers to me and my sister and could not just waltz their way into our lives. My mom died a few years after my sister was born, and my dad became our sole parent. He took care of my sister and me as a single father, but he died in my second year of college. He was killed by a drunk driver in the wrong lane. It was traumatizing for us because we were in the car with him, and although we survived with minor injuries, life without our dad is not the same. We struggled a lot at first, battling with trauma and the uncertainty of our future. I had to combine working odd jobs and learning so I could provide for my sister. I got custody as a sole guardian, as the law had initially tried to connect with my grandparents, our only surviving relatives. However, they said they were not capable of taking us in. I barely know them since I severed ties with them when I was younger because they did not like my mom, so I did not feel so bad about the rejection. In fact, I was a bit glad since I couldn't trust my sister with them. A few days ago, a fairly familiar old lady showed up at my doorstep. Not only was it unannounced, but she rang the bell nonstop like she was in trouble. She introduced herself as my Nana, my father's mother, and since I vaguely remember her, I let her in. I made small talk to get her to explain her unexpected visit, but she was upset that I kept her waiting at the door for a while, so she didn't talk much. I entertained her as best as I could and was really glad when she finally said she had to go. When she got to the door, she said she would come back in 2 days with my grandpa and would like me to be available. Not wanting to be rude, I told her they could come by. It was an awkward meeting for sure. I answered their questions about our lives, even though they felt intrusive. Then my Nana started to get all touchy and emotional, telling me she missed us and asking about my sister and why she wasn't at home for their visit. I wasn't having it. I told her that I barely knew her and that I do not appreciate being touched by strangers. She kept talking about wanting to bond more with us, that it was not right that we lived like we had no relatives. She even claimed that, by law, they were our legal guardians and she had to do her duties towards us. I told her it was not needed, since I'm an adult and I am my sister's guardian. If they were not in our lives when my parents were alive, and when we were involved in that accident, then they lost the right to be in our present lives. She flared up immediately, saying I was ungrateful, hot-tempered, and full of myself. She said some hurtful words and ended it with how she's only here for my sister, and I was in no position to be her guardian. My grandfather sneered and asked if I thought I was the man of the moment. They threatened to call CPS on me if I tried to keep them away from their granddaughter, and they had plans to take her away. I angrily asked them to leave and never come back because I didn't want anything to do with them, and that they were strangers to us. It was an awful experience, and I've been feeling demoralized about the whole thing. So, do I let them into our lives? They abandoned us when we needed help, and my sister doesn't even know them. Am I the a-hole for telling them off and insisting that they are strangers? Update. Thank you so much for all the guidance and support everyone has offered. It means a lot to me during this confusing time. Here's a detailed update on the situation and how things are unfolding based on your advice and the steps I've taken so far. I reached out to a lawyer to discuss the entire situation and get some professional guidance. I explained everything that was going on, and he was very reassuring. He told me quite confidently that those people, my grandparents and that fake lawyer, have absolutely no legal grounds to take my sister away from me. He promised to delve deeper into the legal aspects and said he would get back to me soon with more information. So, I'm currently waiting to hear more from him about our next steps. I still haven't spoken to my sister about any of this. Maybe that sounds a bit selfish, but I have my reasons. I'm worried that if I tell her, she might become curious about them. Or worse, she might decide she wants to meet them. Given everything that's happened, I just don't trust these people. Plus, every time the phone rings, I get this wave of anxiety, fearing it might be them calling to follow through on their threat to contact Child Protective Services. It's been a tense time, to say the least. Let me give you a bit more background on how this all started. My grandparents were somehow convinced by a con man, who posed as a lawyer, that he could assist them in claiming a small inheritance that was actually meant for my sister and me. It appears he brainwashed them quite effectively and may have even been the one to plant the idea of calling CPS as a threat to us. We only discovered his involvement after my real lawyer arranged a civil discussion among all of us. During this meeting, It came out that my dad had left a significant amount for both my sister and me, something I had almost forgotten amidst all the chaos. However, the major focus of the inheritance was on my sister. There's a tradition in my mom's family where certain properties are passed down to the daughters, and my mom had passed this particular property to my sister before her death. Since my sister is only 13, my Nana thought she could be easily manipulated into giving up this property so that they could sell it. That's why they were so intent on taking her away from me. I was merely an obstacle in their path. The realization that our own family could view us as mere stepping stones to their financial gain was appalling. Their actions have shown that they do not see us as their flesh and blood, but rather as means to an end. Even though my Nana later apologized for their rash actions and the harsh words they used, I find it hard to forgive them so easily. The trust that was broken isn't something that can be quickly repaired. As a result of all this, I have initiated the process for a restraining order against them to ensure our safety and peace of mind. I'm also seriously considering relocating to start fresh somewhere else where these painful memories won't constantly haunt us. Finally, I sat down with my sister and explained everything about the visit from our grandparents and the inheritance. I made it clear that she is free to interact with them if she wishes, but she decided against it. She doesn't really know them, and with everything they've said and done, she's unsure she could ever trust them. This decision has brought some relief, as it's one less thing to worry about. So that's the full update. I'm grateful for pulling through this tough situation, and it wouldn't have been possible without the right advice and support from all of you. You've truly been the best during this challenging time in my life. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Now for the top comments. You are not the a-hole op. Even without the update, your grandparents weren't there for you when you and your sister needed them the most. You and your sister lost your parents. They were the only relatives you two had left. But they chose not to be there for you guys. They lost the right to be your grandparents when they did that. To make matters worse, it turns out they only decided to come into your life so they could manipulate your sister and have her give them her inheritance. They're both horrible people, and I wouldn't blame you if you can't forgive them in this lifetime. Story 2. My husband and I had just welcomed our new baby into the world, a joyous occasion for sure. But before our bundle of joy arrived, we were in a real pickle about what to name him. You see, choosing a baby name is kind of a big deal. It's like picking a tiny label your kid is going to wear for their entire life. We went back and forth with lists and books and internet searches, but nothing really seemed to feel just right. Around the same time, my sister-in-law, that's my brother's wife, excitedly announced that they were expecting too. That was wonderful news because it meant our kids would be close in age and hopefully grow up to be great friends. During a family get-together, she shared that if they had a boy, they planned to name him Marshall. Now, Marshall isn't just any name. It's actually my mother's maiden name, which adds a layer of sentimental value to the choice. When she mentioned the name Marshall, it sparked something in me. I thought, what a brilliant idea. It felt like a light bulb moment. So right there in the middle of the conversation, I expressed my admiration for the name and casually mentioned, "Oh, what a great thought. That should totally be on my list." I genuinely meant it because it suddenly seemed like a perfect fit. However, she just laughed it off, and looking back, it's clear she didn't realize I was serious about considering it. To fast forward to the end of my pregnancy, we decided not to settle on a name until we actually met our baby. We believed that the right name would just click once we saw his or her little face. Plus, we kept the gender a surprise until the birth, which added another layer of excitement to the whole process. We had a short list, though, top 3 names for both a boy and a girl, just to be prepared. Then the big day came, and we were overjoyed to welcome a beautiful baby boy into our family. Seeing him for the first time was magical, and suddenly the name Marshall just felt right. It was as if he was always meant to be Marshall. The middle name we had picked paired wonderfully with it too, and everything just fell into place. While driving home from the hospital with our new little one, I playfully commented to my husband about how our son and his soon-to-be cousin would be like identical twins if they both ended up named Marshall. I didn't think much of it at the time. Names aren't a huge deal to me in terms of individuality. I mean, it's not like choosing a name someone famous has would be a deterrent for me. After settling in at home, we sent out the birth announcement to our family to share our happiness and introduce our son. But instead of congratulations, What came back was unexpected. My sister-in-law reacted intensely. She was very upset, feeling that we had stolen her baby's name. According to her, we should have picked a different name since we knew she intended to use Marshall for her baby if it was a boy. She expressed that this overlap made her feel as if her baby's uniqueness and her pregnancy's individuality were compromised. This reaction threw me a bit because I hadn't anticipated such a strong attachment to the idea of a unique name within the family. I'm not deeply entrenched in mom culture where perhaps these things carry more weight, so I might be missing some nuances here. Now I'm in a bit of a tricky situation. I need to navigate this family name drama carefully. It's important to me that our children have a good relationship, and I don't want this name issue to cause long-term friction between us as sisters-in-law or affect the cousins' relationship. I'm thinking about how to approach her to discuss this without making things worse, considering how to explain my side and hopefully find a way to make peace. Maybe it's a big misunderstanding, or maybe I need to understand her perspective better. Either way, it's a delicate dance on the path to resolving our baby name blunder. Was I an a-hole? Now, for the top comments, you're the a-hole. Usually I'm all for the whole. You can't call dibs on a baby name. But what makes this situation different, as has been pointed out, is that your sister-in-law told you the name that she was using 100%. And you immediately told her, face it, it's going on my list. And then you named your baby that. It's not like it's a name your sister-in-law was thinking of using. She was actually naming the baby that. And now, your baby will be the first Marshall. Her special announcement is going to be less special because the immediate thought is likely to be another baby Marshall. She didn't tell you the name to give you baby name ideas. She told you the name because she wanted to share her special moment, and you absolutely crapped all over it. Now, for some comments, you are the a-hole. I forced myself to read through this to see if you redeemed yourself in any way. You did not. That was a name they had picked out yet. You decided to use it. Did you really think they would be okay continuing forward giving their child the name as yours? You are self-centered and have no thought of anyone but yourself. You're the one who is in the wrong. This is one of those things that's common courtesy. Don't name your kid the same name as a relative's kid because it's too complicated, and one of them is going to have to go by a nickname. If your brother and sister-in-law don't change their plans, they look petty and unreasonable, and you're the one that put them in that position. I've always thought that people who kept name secrets were paranoid, but I guess not. You're the eagle. She told you she was planning on using that name, and you flat out stole it. To just spring it on them like that is cold. Do you hate them, or something? Like, are they awful? This isn't a distant relation. I could understand how she would feel. She couldn't use it now. These children would be cousins of a similar age, and it would likely cause a lot of confusion. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law have two boys with names that both begin with J. My husband and I wanted to name our son a name that was kind of similar to one of the boys' names, which also begins with J. We asked them how they felt about it long before I gave birth, and it wasn't even the same name. Story 3. So here's the full scoop on what's been going down with me and my boyfriend, and it's kind of a roller coaster, so buckle up. We've been together for 3 years, and it's been a mix of super tight, super fun times, and some not-so-great, distant moments. Recently, I went on a 2-week holiday with my family. It was a blast, but it meant less time talking to my boyfriend. When I got back, things felt a bit off between us. Then, out of nowhere, we got into this little argument that somehow escalated into a massive discussion about us drifting apart. We usually try to keep things mature, talking through issues rather than letting them explode, but this time it got pretty intense. During this big talk, he dropped a real bombshell. He said he wasn't attracted to me anymore because he preferred skinnier girls. Just so you know, I'm a 19-year-old, pretty average in size, not skinny, but definitely not overweight. I'm a UK size 10, which is totally normal. No one has ever made me feel like my body was an issue before, so this was a shock. He started crying, telling me how horrible he felt for saying it, but honestly, I felt a million times worse. It was devastating to hear that the person I love more than anything found me too big, not attractive enough. In that moment, I had to be super clear with him. I told him straight up that I couldn't be with someone who doesn't find me attractive. It's a basic thing, right? How am I supposed to feel okay being close to him, being vulnerable, if I'm worried he's looking at me with disgust? After our conversation, he left my place in tears. He was a mess, and he begged me to meet up again the next day. I agreed, more out of concern for him than anything. When we met, I had to lay everything out on the table. I asked him, "Why would you want to be with someone you don't actually find beautiful?" It was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had, because deep down, part of me still wanted to just forgive him and move past this. This whole situation has left me really confused. I'm torn between my feelings for him and the hurt from what he said. I love him a lot, but is love enough? Can you truly be happy and feel secure in a relationship where your partner openly admits they don't find you physically attractive? I'm trying to figure out if this is something that can be fixed. Can we work through this together and find a way back to how things were? Or do I need to take a step back and maybe even move on for the sake of my own self-respect? I'm also wrestling with the practical side of things. How do we even begin to repair our relationship if I decide to try? What steps do we need to take? Is there therapy or counseling that could help us? Or is this just a fundamental incompatibility that no amount of talking can fix? And if it comes to it, how do I prepare myself to walk away from someone I still love so much? This is honestly my last resort, thinking about ending things. But it's something I'm willing to consider if it means finding happiness and respect. I really, really love him, but I also need to love myself enough not to settle for a relationship where I'm not valued the way I should be. Has anyone else been in a similar spot? Can love survive a situation where physical attraction has become an issue? I'd really appreciate any advice or experiences you guys might have, because right now I'm feeling pretty lost. Now for the top comments. Do not take him back. You are right to go with your instinct that this relationship is now dead. You will always wonder if he finds you attractive or just doesn't want to deal with the headache of leaving you and having to start over with someone else. You would always feel ashamed by him, and you will always resent him for it. He's tainted your foundation of trust forever. Hell, no, you shouldn't. Not unless you like being made to feel like an unattractive piece of trash. Anytime he gets upset, he doesn't get to not accept a breakup. You and his, to possess if you want to break up, then you are broken up, and he can go cry and kick rocks. He doesn't actually think that and just said it to rile you up and make you insecure, so you can shut up about whatever it was you were arguing about in the first place. Maybe you would even be so ashamed you wouldn't bring up any issues ever. You called his bluff, and now he's backtracking. You can do better. Through this, fishback honey, you go find yourself a man who wants to bang the bones off of you 24/7. He said it out of anger, I'm sure, which is messed up, especially since you've been together for a while and you guys don't tend to argue. I think it was very immature, and personally, I can't imagine seeing my significant other or our relationship the same way if they dropped a bomb like that on me. You deserve and have the right to be with someone who finds you attractive, and likewise, you shouldn't feel forced to stay with someone if you lost attraction to them. It's just not fair for either person, and it's hurtful. It's too bad that it's happened, and it's nice that he's clearly devastated over what he said to you. But there is no taking it back, and that is a tough one to work through. Story 4. What is your family's most devious secret? When I was 7, my dad cheated on my mother with my stepmom, Karen, after her divorce. My mom moved away and got married again. I was always under the impression that my mother abandoned me, and that's what my dad told me too. Karen had a daughter at that time who was 5, Mia. Her and I were kind of close growing up, but when we both hit puberty, our personalities were different. Mia was the typical girly girl. She developed beautifully and was basically like Cassie from Euphoria. She would get all the attention. Even my relatives preferred her more than me. I was basically a nerd, interested in sports. I was told that I didn't look bad and that I'm very attractive and pretty in my own way, but I was overshadowed by Mia. My dad was someone who was an opportunist. Whenever he would see an opportunity for him to shine, he would take it, even if it meant sidelining his own daughter. He saw that Mia got more attention than me, so he invested everything in her. I was kind of jealous, but I wasn't really that bothered because I believed if I did something good, I would be appreciated. So, I studied hard and got into a prestigious university. That was the only time my father threw a party for me, because I was the first in the family to do it. But Mia was jealous of it. Anyways, during my last year of high school, I started dating Tim. He proposed to me when we were sophomores in college, but we decided to wait until our graduation. So one day, during our semester break, I went to his home and saw the inconceivable. He was banging Mia. I was shocked, to say the least. I remember crying and screaming at him. I could never forget the smirk on Mia's face. That's when I knew Mia was an A-word. So, my dad and stepmom knew about it, and guess what? My dad told me to get over it and forgive them. He said, "Tim fell out of love with you. So what? He fell in love with your sister. You should give them your blessing instead of being petty." I shouted back, "Of course you will say that because you cheated on mom." Big mistake. My dad and I had a screaming match. He told me he would disown me if I didn't accept them and come to their wedding. I stormed off and cried for days. That's when I realized something. I was alone. My dad didn't care if I was dead or alive. I started therapy after a friend of mine pushed me to it. It did help a bit, but in my mind, I wanted some revenge. I wanted to be petty and make her regret it. I started thinking about what I could do. My initial plan was to wear white on her wedding day, but then I ran into him as XJ, him and me. I have been one of those couples who were on again, off again. Mia exploited Jay a lot. The last time they broke up was when Jay caught Mia flirting with one of his friends, but there was a lot of history. So when Jay learned about Mia and Tim, he was a little angry. He kept saying he wishes he could just take revenge on all the times Mia has done him wrong. So, I had another plan. I knew I still had feelings for Jay, so I asked him to be my plus one at her wedding. It would piss her off, but we agreed that after that, we would part ways. So, when the wedding came, I was not at the wedding party. My dad was cordial with me because I wasn't creating trouble, so I went to a wedding with Jay. I was wearing a bright red dress because I read that red means you slept with the groom. It was also over the top. I might have made some heads turn. When Mia saw me with Jay, her face turned pale. I was purposely being very touchy with Jay, like whispering in his ears, touching his shoulder, dancing and singing with him very closely. I swear Mia was just as red as my dress. I was also asked to give a speech. I kept it short. Thank God I do not have any more sisters. Otherwise, Tim would have swapped Mia with one of them. You know, he has a fetish for banging his fiancée's sisters behind her back. Based on the connotation from the audience and the screaming from my left ear, I stirred up some commotion. Needless to say, Jay and I were asked to leave the next day. I was bombarded with messages and phone calls, but I didn't pick any of them. As for Jay, he stuck to our deal, and I never saw him again after the wedding incident. I decided I should find my mom because something in me was telling me that she didn't abandon me. It wasn't hard to find her. I found her on Facebook, and we started chatting. She is married and has 2 boys, my half-brothers. I got the real story from her. She didn't abandon me. My father won the custody case. He used my mom's past substance abuse to take away her visitation rights. We reconciled, and for the first time in my life, I felt welcomed. I also met my stepfather and my 2 brothers. They are amazing people. Since then, I would regularly meet them. 2 years after the wedding incident, I met a guy, Andy. We met during an alumni program at our college. He also went to our college, but he was 5 years my senior. We had a lot in common. He was kind, sweet, and very mature. He knew about my past and has been really supportive. He was better than Tim in every other way. He was charming and had a really high position in his job. After 2 years, my sister contacted me out of the blue and told me she was pregnant and now wants to bury the hatchets. I was very reluctant. I was afraid that she would try to steal Andy away from me as well. But Andy reassured me. He is not that weak, honestly. I did want to be a dad again, so I gave it a shot. I went to dinner with Andy, and to my surprise, Tim recognized him. It was later revealed to me that Andy was Tim's boss. This was the fact I didn't know. My dad and stepmom brought me to her and said that my relationship with Andy is unacceptable because I'm trying to hurt my sister by dating Tim's boss. I told them to F off. My love life is none of their business. The dinner went sour after that. I got a drunken call from Tim. He told me he is very unhappy with my sister and that he actually wants to escape. He never knew what he lost until he saw me with Andy. I ignored him without hesitation, then the phone calls didn't stop. First, it was my dad telling me that me dating Andy is causing tension between my sister and Tim. I told him their marital life is none of my business. I got a call from my stepsister, who asked if she could come to my house to talk. I told her after the dinner party. I want nothing to do with any of them, but she didn't listen. Instead, she went to Andy's office to convince him to talk to me. Of course, Tim saw this and accused her of trying to seduce Andy, like he seduced him. Long story short, he had to fire Tim for his misbehavior. This caused even more tension. Tim became verbally abusive towards me and said his life was ruined because of her. They separated, and Tim is trying to figure out how he can handle the divorce proceedings. After the Tim and me drama, my dad suddenly showed up in my apartment. He was following his eyes out that he caught Karen sleeping with his male cousin. He was devastated. So I told him what he said to me when Tim cheated on me. Karen fell out of love with you, so she fell in love with your cousin. You should give them your blessing instead of being petty. My father's face was rotten, to say the least. Now, I have two family members who are going through divorce. Sam and Mia tried to reconcile, but eventually settled for divorce. My dad did apologize to me for what he did to me and Mom. I told him that he deserved what's coming for him and that I have no feeling left for him, not even pity. If the time ever comes, I might forgive him, but I don't want him anymore. He will not be walking me down the aisle. Andy and I are recently engaged. We are having a small ceremony with just close friends and family. I was only planning for a petty revenge, but karma got them better.